So now we are ready to write our processing functions. So where in our main function do we do any calculations? Right here, right? We're taking miles, dividing it by gallons to find the miles per gallon. So we want to change that into a processing function. So I'm going to first comment this out because I want to keep that so we can refer back to it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set miles per gallon, and I'm going to write a function, calc mpg. Okay, well, what information does this function need from the main function? It needs the miles and the gallons, right? That's how we're going to calculate miles per gallon. So I'm going to have to pass miles and gallons to this function. So I'm going to type in miles, comma, gallons. And these are what is called arguments. The values that you pass to a function are called arguments. Okay, and then I'm ready to define that function down here. So def calc miles per gallon. And then when you pass arguments, you have to have variables to hold those values, right? So if miles contains 256 and gallons contain 16, I need variables in this function to hold that information, because this function can't get miles and gallons up here, right? It does not have access to any of the variables up in main. So I'm going to create two local variables, miles and gallons. I could call this M and G if I wanted. It doesn't have to be the same name, because like we saw earlier, any variables that I create in the function are separate variables, right? They could have the same name. They don't have to have the same name because they are separate variables. So this is miles and this is gallons. And then the colon. Okay, so I'm going to create a local variable, miles per gallon. I'll set that to 0. And then I'll calculate miles divided by gallons. And then how does this value get back up to main? I have to return it. So if you notice on these assignment statements, when we had the input statement over here, we knew that this function had to return information because we had set that up earlier, right? The input function was going to store the input value into miles, just like this function call will store whatever this get miles returns into miles. Same thing here. This calculation, the results is stored into MPG, right? So when I call the function, it needs to return a value that I can store into MPG. Okay, so let's walk through this again. So over here, I have a variable miles, and let's say that's, we'll set it to 0, and then gallons. So I'm going to just kind of go, and then mile per gallon. Okay, so I'm going to print, I'll get the miles, let's say they say 345 miles, right? Because this function down here will prompt for miles and return it. And then the gallons, this function returns, let's say 16.4. Okay, and then when I get to this line, calculate miles per gallon, we'll send the miles to this parameter and the gallons to this parameter. And order matters. Okay, the first argument goes into the first parameter. The second argument goes into the second parameter. And these are separate variables. These are actual variables that I'm creating in this function. I happen to be creating them within the parentheses, but they are being created. This one's called miles, and this one is called gallons. So it takes the 345 and it will put it into this variable. And then it'll take the 16.4 and put it into this variable. So these variables, when they're created, are initialized to the values that are in the arguments. Okay, these are arguments. And these are the parameters. Okay, so then I'm going to do my calculation. So miles per gallon is created, and I do 345 divided by 16.4. So I'm going to actually have to do that calculation. And the result is 21.036584, some long number. Okay, so that's stored in here. And then I'm going, how do I get the miles per gallon? How do I get this number up into mains miles per gallon? I have to return it. And so when I return it, it will be stored into mains miles per gallon. So this will be 21.036584. And then all these variables go away. After the function returns, those variables go away. Okay, so now I have miles, gallons, and miles per gallons populated with function calls.